Hello, I'm Larry Payne, host of Dialogue Houston and Interchange Community Affairs talk shows. Join me for an ongoing conversation around the issues shaping and transforming Houston, as we explore their impact with some of our city's most innovative and creative leaders of our time. Welcome to this session of Conversations. It's a pleasure to have you join us this week. As always, in the topper, let me thank you of the show. Let me thank you for your calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows that we've aired, and your wonderful, thoughtful ideas and guests for subject and topics to be covered on upcoming sessions of Conversations with Larry Payne. We have a great show planned for you today, and I really wanted to reach out to someone who I knew could help us through the era and the morass that we're in during these troubling times. In any way that you want to define troubling times, we're in the middle of it. We're almost in some chaos in many ways. But I thought about throughout the community who I could reach out to, and my good friend John Reed came to mind. Dr. John Reed, who is a thought leader, who's a servant leader. He's an author, a wonderful book called Pinpointing Excellence. But he's also a coach and professor and a lecturer at all of our universities, University of Houston, Rice, University of St. Thomas, and UT. And he really is one of the individuals in our community who sees the big picture, who understands the human condition, who understands human beings. And I really wanted someone who I could talk with about the essence of human beingness. In this era of all human beings' lives matter, what does that look like, feel like, sound like? What should that act like in relationship to other human beings? Welcome, John.
Thank you, Larry.
What a pleasure to have you join us.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
You know, I really meant what I said. It's part of, I think, where we are now is understanding the human condition and understanding how we all as human beings, be that those differences and other labels that we could put on, we come to it the same on an equal playing field just because we're human beings. No other definitions or titles needed.
Yes. Yes.
But that's not necessarily true.
No. No.
What are we going to do?
Wow. Well, you're an expert and have written a book on servant leadership, Larry, and I think, you know, when I think about all the different executives I work with and all the different places and where they've come from in terms of their own development, the one thing that they do that's very effective is reach out and model things that are basic, like respect and understanding, and they actually listen effectively. And I know that sounds like blocking and tackling to everybody, but that, to me, that seems like one of the keys to building respectful relationships at all levels of an organization. It starts with that.
And it is really housed in that issue of relationships.
Yes.
Relationships built on mutual trust and respect, because we know nothing happens without trust.
Absolutely.
Nothing.
Nothing. It's very hard. It's very hard to get anything done, as you know, if you're an organizational leader. For example, if you can't establish trust and you aren't a relatively transparent leader and you don't sort of walk the talk, people pick that up very quickly, and people can be excellent at nodding their heads and saying the right things and absolutely not getting on board if they don't feel trust.
And that trust factor then goes into the second area. If you have the trustful relationships, then you can have commitment and accountability to and for each other, right? Because it is a two-way street.
Yes.
But without the trust, you're never going to have the commitment to and for each other.
That's right. You have to be able to believe that what you're hearing from the other person is authentic. And again, people, particularly bright people, are very, very good at picking up if it's authentic, and if it's only 90% authentic or 50% authentic, that comes through too. And that's not a road to productive relationships.
And that authenticity and credibility and integrity, we were talking before we started taping, with this age of technology, we got a little problem there, because a myth, a rumor, an opinion, a fact, and the truth can all pass for the same thing.
Yes.
So how do I verify? They always say trust, but verify.
Gosh, That's a hard one, I think, Larry, because if you, and I struggle with this, if you look at what's coming across the transom, so to speak,
And
in terms of electronic media, you don't have to be particularly well schooled in anything to be on YouTube and to be globally recognized.
Instant expert.
And you can be an expert, and that's, maybe you are an expert, but maybe you're not. But the point is, there are no filters,
Right.
and you can have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers and not really have much to say, right? It can be sensationalistic, it can be shallow, it might be substantive, it might be helpful, it might be on point,
Right.
it might be rooted in real knowledge and expertise, but gee, often it's not.
And if my filters, and therefore in a sense my lenses, are already prejudicial, and then all that I receive and get input from is feeding that same base presidential statement or belief, then I never get outside of that era or zone to learn input around something new and different.
You're absolutely right. And I was just talking with my wife about this last night as we were watching the Republican National Convention. So, it takes effort and it takes time to actually try and dissect issues
Right.
logically and in detail, looking at pros and cons and weighing advantages and disadvantages. That's work. It's pretty easy just to sit there and get a flash of 9 seconds of a phrase that sort of latches onto you, and to simplistically think, well, good, that's what's registering with me, that's the way I'm going to go.
So what happened to critical thinking? We keep talking about young people in school and from every age and every grade level about the need to be a critical thinker and how to be, but we don't apply it, it seems, more to adults.
Well, a fair number of the folks that I work with are tremendously capable, but critical thinking is like any other muscle. You can always get better at it, and
You
it's
gotta use it.
and like any other muscle, it can atrophy if you don't use it.
Yeah.
So I worry when I look around. I have 4 kids, and they all spend a fair amount of time electronically. And I don't think electronics lend themselves to critical thinking. So I worry about that. They're well educated and bright and capable. And of course, if I suggest to them they should spend less time electronically, that's just wah, 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 wah. But I hope that they are in situations where they're forced to do more critical thinking.
I think there's a nexus, though, between the electronic world, technology world we live in, and the lack of human being connectiveness in the relationship building, eyeball to eyeball, time spent with, looking across the table at someone, having a meal, tonality, inflection in their voice, the changes in their facial expression. Those machines, that's not the relationships I'm talking. Texting, tweeting, emailing, that's not the relationship.
You're absolutely right. That's right. And when you're doing executive coaching, for example, or any kind of support activity, that kind of trust building is critical, particularly early in the relationship. I think there are technologies like Skype, for example, and WebEx that do a pretty good job electronically of allowing for all of those.
And it works, but after we've started
nonverbals.
the first base, face-to-face first.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's just an opinion.
We're going to pick, no, I think it's a great opinion. We're going to pick up on that and other things. We're going to take a small pause and break. When we come back, we're going to look at this whole issue of how we really get into developing these relationships with human beings. Remember, the key thing about these relationships, not only the mutual trust and respect, but you have to have them before you need them. It is too late in the middle of the need to say, I wish I had a relationship with so-and-so. You had all this time to develop it, you had all this time to avail yourselves of it. Now you need it. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Conversations. If you're with us before the break, we're having a fascinating discussion with our guest this week, who is John Reed, the principal of Quinn Reed Associates, who is also this wonderful thought leader, servant leader, and author in our community, who we're looking at how, in search of, basically the way I would put it now, in search of the common good. In search of the common good means, first of all, finding common ground. We were talking before the break about the importance of relationships built on mutual trust and respect that allows us to then have commitment and accountability to and for each other. Now it's time to talk about the third part of that little triangle. Put the human being in the middle, draw a triangle, top is relationship, right side is commitment and accountability. Is commitment, accountability to and for each other. The third side, though, is action and behaviors. That's where we were leading off to. It's all about, in the end of the day, about the action and behaviors, right? Don't tell me you love me. Don't tell me you care for me. Don't tell me you have concern and passion for the issues that are impacting my life. Just show me through your act. That's where it always falls down, though.
Well, you know, Larry, you're very well versed in this. Changing behavior,
Yep.
particularly well-ingrained behavior, even if you're highly motivated and you have support around you and you have all the time in the world, it's still tough.
Mm-hmm.
So you're absolutely right. Getting, for example, executive leaders and their organizations to make a shift in the way they behave, in the culture that they have, actually is very, very challenging. It can be done, and the payoffs are great. The outcomes can be very good, but there's no question about it. It's a lot of work. It's not just something where you show up
Mm-hmm.
and snap your fingers and everything's great.
I had a CEO on a show a while back that said, I have an executive coach. The reason I have an executive coach because I was ready and moving forward, but I just couldn't take that final step to make the actual movement toward the change.
That's right. So someone like that, a coach, is there, I think, mainly to be a constructive sort of prod in the side,
Mm-hmm.
an encourager, but also there are times where you have to sort of be a pretty tough taskmaster to get folks at the C-suite level, for example, who are so busy and have got 17 different things flying at them at any
Mm-hmm.
given time that it's easy to sort of park this behavior change or executive development work. So sometimes you have to be the sticky wicket.
Right. He knew what to do. He had come to the understanding of what he needed to do. He knew why he needed to do it. He understood the ethical reasons to do it. He just
Sure.
couldn't make himself take that last next step to actually make the change,
That's right.
which meant disruption
That's right.
and
Right.
meant letting go of some people, bringing in new people for the sake of the organization.
Right. And senior leaders or any accomplished professional is used to being good at what they do, and they're used to being effective and pretty comfortable in what they do. And behavior change usually means you're going to have a period of some time in there when it's going to feel somewhat awkward. It's not going to feel perfect. And you need somebody there, in my opinion, someone there to help you sort of push through until it gets embedded and more normalized.
And that doesn't, and the same rules apply whether you're talking corporate, nonprofit, religious institutions, any other thing, right?
People are people.
But it also applies in our personal, professional, and public lives. Because I think what happens in these conversations is kind of this classic, the world as it is or the world as it should be. Well, when you go down that rabbit trail either direction, there's a lot of understood definitions of discernment that may or may not be true, right?
That's right. There's some myths.
There's some myths.
There's some myths.
And part of the myths is your circle. If your circle is narrow, then you're constantly fed, as we were talking earlier, the same reality. It may not be really the reality, but if you don't have a circle that's broad and deep, what they say, the bench got to be both broad and deep, so you get different opinions,
Right.
perspectives, and viewpoints.
Right. Right.
And many people don't want to hear. They know what they need to hear, what they don't want to hear it. That's why they surround themselves with yes people.
Well, and I know you know and have seen this, the very best leaders, the most effective leaders, particularly as the society becomes more and more and more diverse and global, they are the people that are secure enough to surround themselves with people who are extraordinarily talented, in some ways more talented than they are, and to stay open to all their different points of view and to be able to integrate them.
But Houston, as we know, is changing. It looks like every other major city, urban city in the world, in the United States, particularly Houston.
Sure.
Our good friend Kleinberg says the experiment of what the rest of the country, the United States, will be like is happening here in Houston every day.
Yes.
The fourth largest diverse international, da-da-da.
Yes.
But we're diverse and we're international. We may even be metropolitan, but we're not cosmopolitan because we don't have this sense of we're all in this together yet.
I agree with you. I think we're making
headroads
because of people like you, Larry. I think we're making
and our current
real
mayor
progress.
and our current
Absolutely.
leadership is doing it, but we got a ways to go yet.
Got a ways to go, and I think I'm a little biased, but I think we're doing better than other cities.
I think we are too.
And
I think we are too.
but it's that I think in many ways it comes back to that same thing that you described, where you have to sort of a certain amount of time you have to sort of put yourself in situations where you're a little bit outside your normal clique, so you can get that kind of input, experience those different points of view, and have those exchanges.
Well, we had Steve Kleinberg on a few weeks ago, and he was saying, of course, we already know Houston, yes, is wonderful, the most diverse and changing demographics and yada yada, but we're still the most gated community, the most segregated community, the most, go down the list.
Yes.
And he says the question is not if we're diverse. Of course we're diverse. We're more than diverse. The numbers are there. Are we going to move to the next level, which is pluralism? A pluralistic society, by definition, says the human being counts just because they're a human being, no other label. In the world of diversity, we still count how many of this kind, how many of that kind. We got to move. Houston is diverse. You're going to trip over yourself with diversity, but that's not the issue.
Right, right. I think it comes back to that. Those basics that you just described, the respect for each other, the openness and authenticity, a willingness to sort of take some courage also to state different points of view if you're in a situation where you might get something coming back that's oppositional. But that's the only path that I can see towards getting to that point that you just described.
Well, we have the have and the have-nots. We have all of those categories. We have the poor. We have all those things. Yes, we do. The have-nots. We have to have some who want more, the middle class. We have the have-nots. We have to have. It's not a question of blaming or pointing fingers, but how do you get to the common good and finding that common ground if you, as you said, first of all, I think it really goes back to that issue of the human being. Until you can, we tolerate. That word came in the 60s. I talked about. The word tolerance was the word I think was just a bare minimum thing to allow people to kind of say, okay, yeah, I will learn how to tolerate you. Right. I tolerate the roaches, the ants, mosquitoes, and heat in Texas. I don't want to put a human being on the same level of something I tolerate.
Right.
What happened to acceptance?
Right, right, right.
Until you can get to acceptance, you're not going to get anywhere.
Right. We in what I do, the catchphrase that's been popular over a number of years is multicultural integration, and I think it gets a little bit overused, but I think it has an element of it that's kind of a minimalistic, let's just sort of tolerate as much as we can tolerate. What we now aim for more often is really truly aligning different people of different points of view, different, again, diverse, multicultural, but really aligning them so you get that leverage in terms of performance and outcome.
And alignment only comes again with time spent with, right?
Absolutely.
So if we're going to take a break, we'll come back. We're going to pick up on time spent with. What does that really look like, feel like, act like when you play it out in a wonderful city like Houston, a great, wonderful metropolitan city, trying to become a cosmopolitan city, trying to have all human beings understood, that's for the essence of their human beingness. What would that look like if we really believe that and try to play it out as we go forward? We'll be right back. I'm sitting with John Reed, and we're having a fascinating conversation about Houston today and tomorrow. But I want to pose something in this last segment. In 2036, Houston, Texas will celebrate its 200th anniversary. Its 200th anniversary. Our wonderful mayor, Sylvester Turner, is the 62nd mayor of the city of Houston. In 2036, we will have elected our 65th mayor, so 2.5 mayors from now, given the 4-year term thing. So the 65th mayor, into, let's just say, her second year of her first term, will get to stand in Discovery Green roughly around August 23rd of 2036 and celebrate the 200th anniversary of the city of Houston. So I've been asking everybody this question. What is your #1 goal that you'd like to see for Houston by 2036? And the second part of the question is, and how would you be acting today if you really believed that and wanted that to happen? Because that's really what it's about, right? You deal with corporations, you deal with CEOs, you deal with organizational and planning and strategic planning and organizational design. Most corporations can tell you down the road 20 years who their next 2 or 3 CEOs are. Succession planning, grooming, development, training. We don't think long term in our public lives many times. And I think it's important that we start doing that, because of the demands of living the public life of we the people and the discourses that need to occur so that we become we the people and us, not the I and me people, is still a long ways to go, is it not?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, gosh, in 2036 I'll be 82 years old, so I hope I'm still here.
You'll be here.
I'll be here.
My wonderful mother just passed at 96, so I plan to be here.
Yeah. Well, I, as you were describing that, Larry, you know, what came to mind for me is something I care about very much, and that's education. And I do some volunteering for great systems like KIP, and I've done some work for HISD and other great organizations. And I think 20 years from now, what I'd like to see is a far better educated and far more capable population across the board. And I just over the years, I think that really starts with education at the primary school level. So that seems to be a key from my point of view.
And for Houston, since you brought up education, in Houston, we're in the second era of the resegregation of our school system, of HISD. You know, and it's just the reality of how that has kind of developed with demographic changes and economic patterns and housing patterns and neighborhood patterns. But this past school year, there were only 8–9% left of Anglo-Caucasian white students left in HISD. So I grew up in the first era of segregation. Just because the schools are resegregated, I got a great education, a fantastic education. I'll put my little, let's see, we were colored back then. I'll put my little poor colored education up against anybody's education, all right? So yes, there's poverty today, even more poverty in some ways than then. But the difference is I had a community, I had a whole neighborhood, I had a village that looked after me, took care of us. All children were our children. Right. That's not true today.
It sure seems, if you look at the news just of the last month.
We talk about them being all our children.
It seems like a lot of loneliness, a lot of isolation, which and I'm an organizational psychologist, not a clinical psychologist, but I've had enough clinical training, so you can sort of see how if people are isolated and under tremendous stress, and they don't have a place to get support, the sort of problems that develop from that and the behaviors that develop from those problems can be very damaging and very destructive.
And so we're in that middle of that, aren't we? I think we're in the middle passage. Somebody said it's almost like we're in the 60s again, even though this is 2016. But the point you were mentioning, just to use some of the words and phrases we hear every day with this kind of divide we have of the separation of everything, dissatisfaction, discontent, anger, fear, frustration, resentment, confusion, chaos. And those wedges are being driven from all angles of all the time. Divisiveness here, and the Congress is divided, everybody's divided.
Right.
You know, we live in our silos.
That's right.
And I hear this when I go to the far west side of town. I think I told you this the other day. Those are not my children. Not as a mean-spirited statement, not an ugly statement, not a negative. The voice is not mad about it. It's not even a racist statement. It's just a total disconnect. Those are not my children.
Right.
And then I hear when I go to the other parts of town, I say, well, look, the schools are already segregated. Again, what we need is adults. We need mentors and tutors. When I was growing up, the void that was filled was because we had great adults, all adults, not just parents, mentors and tutors working in school. Well, those people in the neighborhoods where we need them the most, they've all moved to the woods and the lands. They come back into the inner city, into the urban, into where they grew up, maybe for Sunday worship, church, parish, temple, synagogue, mosque, Friday, Saturday, Sunday worship, it doesn't matter. May stay around and have dinner with mother, if mother still lives in the neighborhood, then they go back to the land and the woods. So we have this whole thing that is in the need of the human being that's just not caring, not there. One group doesn't care, the other group is not present.
Right.
What do we do?
Right. Well, my own opinion, it's just an opinion, is that on an individual level, and I try and do this, is to sort of get out in the community where you can, and be a mentor and be a volunteer and be a support to people, expecting nothing in return, and that's an opportunity, as you were describing it, to move outside of the circle, so to speak. There's nothing wrong with a circle, and it's the most normal thing in the world to be drawn to people who are sort of like you. So, but as an individual, to get out and get engaged for an hour or two, perhaps a week. I know we all have very, very tight schedules, but I think if everybody did that, just that, there'd be a huge shift in the feeling of what's going on.
And as again we were talking earlier, it only takes one in that group, in that sphere of influence, who starts that dialogue and discourse in a different direction, and then they become the catalyst to influence their sphere of influence, and that ripple effect is what we're needing, is what we're missing.
Yeah. Well, and you know, we were talking about this in the earlier segment, but say executive leaders, if an executive leader models that behavior, getting out in the community, you would be amazed. And there are many who do, who do a superb job of that. That has a ripple effect, because there's nothing more powerful than modeling.
The police, the neighborhood-oriented policing. When you get out of your squad car, you get out of your vehicle, and you walk the neighborhood, you get to know the people, they get to know you, develop relationships, you speak to everyone, they speak to you. It's that personal human contact and human touch that we're missing.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's why I started off with the whole human being thing. Yes. I think there is something to the essence of human beingness. We're hardwired in a way we can't treat an individual and a person the same way we treat a human being.
And you know, going back to your question about 2036 and what it would look like, I know it's an often used phrase, but emotional intelligence, in other words, learning how to relate to people and learning to track how you're landing with people, so you're really effective. And building relationships, that's a critical skill.
It is.
And I don't think it gets enough play, particularly in the electronic world.
Speaking of electronics, we have to go. Thanks, John.
It's a pleasure.
We'll pick this up again, and we'll continue this as we go forward. To converse is to humanize the human being as human beings. So spend time with people. Develop those relationships of mutual trust and respect. Begin to develop understanding of commitment and accountability to and for each other, particularly other who may be different from myself, may not look like me. So we can get to the third part, which is the what? The action behaviors that show we care about other human beings. Use words only if necessary. Do not tell me you love me, just show me you love me. We have to go. We have to get out of here for this week. Until next time, as always, peace, power, and love.